They say a flag is just a piece of cloth. But what if I told you that a scrap of fabric, fluttering in the wind, could decide the fate of entire ships? Fortunes worth millions in today's money, and even the lives of hundreds of sailors. Pirates knew this better than anyone. For them, a flag was never just decoration. It was a weapon, a psychological trap, and sometimes the deadliest trick they had in their arsenal. And the most famous of these flags, the Jolly Roger, wasn't just a symbol of death. It was a carefully engineered lie. Imagine you're a sailor in the early 1700s. The sun is brutal. The air smells of salt and sweat, and the sea is calm but tense, as if it knows what's about to happen. On the horizon, you spot a ship. At first, relief another vessel means company in the endless void. Maybe trade, maybe news from home. But then you see it. Black canvas rising on the mast. White skull and crossbones glaring back at you. Your blood turns to ice. You know what that flag means, or at least you think you do? Before we dive deeper, if you love uncovering the hidden truths behind history's most iconic symbols, then hit that like button and subscribe. It keeps this channel alive and helps bring you even more stories that textbooks left out. Because here's the secret. Most people today believe the Jolly Roger was just a pirate team logo, something to make them look fierce. But in reality, it was much more sophisticated. Pirate flags were tools of psychological warfare designed to manipulate the minds of their enemies before a single shot was fired. And often, they didn't mean what you thought they did. In fact, many sailors who surrendered at the sight of a pirate flag weren't saving their lives. They were walking into a carefully staged performance. Pirates thrived on reputation. They didn't have powerful navies or kingdoms backing them. They didn't have endless supplies or ports to fall back on. What they had was fear, and the flag was the perfect amplifier of that fear. But here's the twist. The Jolly Roger wasn't even the first flag pirates used. Long before black banners with skulls, there was another color that struck terror across the seas: red. A plain red flag, nothing else. To us, it might look simple, almost boring. But to sailors of the 18th century, the red flag carried one clear, blood-chilling message: no quarter, no mercy. If you fought back, every man on board would die. No survivors. Now, here's where the trickery comes in. Pirates often played with these flags the way magicians play with cards. They would raise a friendly flag, at first maybe the colors of France, England, or Spain, so their target would think they were safe. Then, at just the right moment, the friendly flag came down, and the black or red banner shot up the mast. This sudden transformation wasn't random. It was designed to shock, to freeze the prey in panic, and to make resistance seem hopeless. Imagine the gut punch. One moment you think it's a harmless merchant ship passing by. The next, you realize it's death itself bearing down on you. But even more cunning was how pirates mixed and matched their flags depending on their goals. If they wanted to scare you into surrender without wasting ammunition, the black flag was perfect. It said, give up, and maybe we'll spare you. If you resisted. Then came the red flag, a declaration that the rules of mercy were gone. This wasn't just battle, it was theater. A deadly performance staged with cloth and color. One of the most feared pirates, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, understood this better than anyone. His personal flag didn't just show a skull. It showed a horned skeleton holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear in the other, pointing it at a bleeding heart. Every detail was deliberate. The skeleton wasn't just a symbol of death, it was the devil himself. The hourglass was a reminder that time was running out, and the bleeding heart left no room for doubt. Resist, and you will bleed. Now, did Blackbeard kill everyone who crossed him? No. In fact, he preferred not to fight at all. His flag was a lie, an exaggerated mask of cruelty designed to terrify crews into giving up without a struggle. And it worked. Ships surrendered at the mere sight of it. But not all pirate flags were black. Some were surprisingly creative, even playful in their menace. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, carried a flag showing himself standing with a skeleton, both holding hourglasses. Another of his flags showed him standing on top of two skulls labeled a Barbadian S-head and a Martiniquan S-head. A very personal warning to those who had crossed him. These weren't random doodles, they were targeted propaganda. Roberts used his flag to spread his reputation faster than any rumor. Even ships that had never seen him in person trembled when they recognized his banner. This raises an uncomfortable truth. The pirate flag wasn't just about scaring enemies. It was about saving pirates themselves. Every battle they avoided meant fewer injuries, fewer wasted supplies, and fewer chances of being captured. In a way, the Jolly Roger wasn't a symbol of death, was a shield against it. By making their opponents believe they were facing monsters, pirates avoided having to prove it. But here's the paradox. While the Jolly Roger promised mercy if you surrendered quickly, mercy was never guaranteed. Some pirates kept their word, others didn't. The flag was a gamble. Do you take your chances and give up, hoping they'll spare you? Or do you fight to the death, knowing that surrender might mean torture anyway? This psychological trap was the true genius of pirate flags. They forced victims into making decisions under fear, and fear almost always clouded judgment. Let's pause for a second. Think about how modern warfare uses drones, propaganda videos, or even misinformation campaigns. The goal isn't always to destroy the enemy physically, it's to break their spirit, to make them surrender without a fight. Pirates were doing the exact same thing centuries ago with nothing more than paint and cloth. Their flags were the original weapons of psychological warfare. But the deception went even further. Pirates sometimes carried multiple flags for the same encounter. First, a national flag to lure in their prey. Then, the Black Jolly Roger to demand surrender. And if their victims resisted, the red flag to seal their fate. This sequence wasn't improvised. It was choreography designed to manipulate emotions step by step, from comfort to fear to despair. And here's something even more fascinating. Not all pirates used skulls and bones. Some used entire scenes, almost like comic strips in the sky. Christopher Moody's flag, for example, was a blood-red canvas featuring a winged skeleton holding a dagger and an hourglass, next to a skull and crossbones. It was one of the most detailed and terrifying banners ever flown. Others used daggers, spears, or even full skeletons dancing. The message was always the same. Death is near, time is short, resistance is useless. So the next time you imagine pirates hoisting their flags with reckless swagger, remember, it wasn't random bravado. It was a cold, calculated performance. Every thread was woven with purpose, and the true terror of the Jolly Roger wasn't that it promised death. It was that you never really knew what it promised at all. But this raises a bigger question. If pirate flags were such powerful weapons of fear, where did they come from in the first place? Why did pirates choose black and red, skulls and skeletons, instead of, say, dragons, lions, or other symbols of power? The answer lies in the strange overlap between pirate culture, religion, and the brutal rules of the sea. And the deeper you go, the more you realize that Jolly Roger itself may have been a stolen idea, repurposed and twisted into the most feared symbol in maritime history. Where did the Jolly Roger come from? The origins are murky, wrapped in legends and half-truths, but historians have uncovered some compelling clues. One of the strongest theories traces the black flag back to the world of privateering. Privateers were basically state-sanctioned pirates, carrying government licenses called letters of marque that gave them permission to attack enemy ships during wartime. Unlike pirates, they weren't supposed to be criminals. They were patriots, at least on paper. But when peace treaties were signed and wars ended, thousands of privateers suddenly found themselves unemployed. Their skills were violence and theft. Their tools were ships and cannons. and now their governments had no use for them. Many simply kept doing what they knew best, only now without legal cover. They slid seamlessly into piracy. And here's the link. Privateers had long used colored flags to send messages at sea. A solid black flag often meant we intend to give quarter if you surrendered. A solid red flag meant we will give no quarter. Pirates borrowed these signals but twisted them. They didn't just wave a plain black banner, they added skulls, bones, and hourglasses to amplify the dread. In other words, the pirate flag was born out of a mixture of naval tradition and raw theater. But there's another theory, darker still. Some believe the term Jolly Roger itself came from the French words Joli Rouge, meaning pretty red. In early piracy, the red flag was the true mark of terror. Over time, the phrase morphed in English, and as black flags with skulls became more common, the name stuck to them instead. Others argue the term came from Old Roger, a nickname for the devil. Both theories point to the same unsettling conclusion. The pirate flag was meant to blur the line between man and demon, between sailor and executioner. It wasn't just cloth, it was identity. So why skulls? Why bones? Why hourglasses? To us today, they might seem like the stuff of Halloween decorations. But in the early 1700s, these symbols were loaded with meaning. The skull was a universal reminder of mortality, something every sailor lived with daily. The bones weren't random either. Cross femurs were often placed under skulls in graveyards of the era. These were not cartoon images, they were grave markers, pulled straight from the imagery of death itself. The hourglass was even more sinister. It reminded victims that their time was slipping away, that death wasn't just possible, but imminent. For sailors who spent months staring at the endless ocean, isolated and fragile against nature, these symbols carried a weight that words never could. And it worked. Accounts from merchant sailors reveal how panic spread the moment a pirate flag was raised. Sometimes, whole crews abandoned their cannons before the first shot was fired. Ships surrendered without resistance, captains begged for mercy, and fortunes were handed over simply because of a piece of cloth. It was power without gunpowder, dominance without bloodshed. But pirates weren't satisfied with just scaring strangers. They wanted to terrify specific enemies. That's why so many flags contained personal touches. Take Black Bart Roberts again. His vendetta against the islands of Barbados and Martinique was immortalized in his banners. He wanted those islands to know exactly who was coming for them. To his enemies, the message was chilling. Your fate is sealed. Your death's already counted. To everyone else, the message was reputation. Roberts became infamous not just as a pirate, but as a living nightmare. This blending of theater and warfare raises an important point. Pirates were marketers long before advertising agencies existed. They understood branding better than many modern companies. A pirate flag was a logo, instantly recognizable, carrying a promise of what was to come. The difference is that while a company promises quality, pirates promised terror. And like all great brands, consistency mattered. A flag needed to be feared from one side of the ocean to the other. But not all pirates wanted the same effect. Some favored plain black flags, simple but effective. Others, like Moody or Blackbeard, piled on the details to drive the message home. The choice of flag revealed something about the pirate psychology. Was he content with general fear, or did he crave a theatrical persona? In either case, the goal was the same: to win battles before they even began. Yet for all their menace, pirate flags carried a dangerous flaw. Once you raised the Jolly Roger, you declared to the world that you were outside the law. Unlike privateers who could claim government protection, pirates who flew the Black Banner had no shield. They weren't rebels, they were enemies of all nations. Any Navy ship that caught them had the right to execute them on the spot. By choosing the flag, pirates chose damnation. And still, they flew it proudly. Why? Because the benefits outweighed the risks. In the cruel math of piracy, One terrifying flag could save weeks of fighting, lives of crew members, and precious supplies. Pirates lived on the edge. Their lives were already short, hunted by navies and plagued by disease. For them, a flag wasn't about legality, it was about survival. But let's peel back another layer. Pirate flags didn't just fool their enemies. Sometimes they fooled history itself. Consider this. Very few original Jolly Rogers survive today. Most of what we know about them comes from descriptions, drawings, and reports. It's possible that some designs we believe to be authentic were exaggerated or even invented later. The skull and crossbones may have been less common than we think. In reality, many pirate flags were simple plain black or red because paint and cloth were expensive, and pirates weren't always artists. The elaborate designs we celebrate today may have been the exception, not the rule. Still, the myth has power. Even now, centuries later, the Jolly Roger remains one of the most recognizable symbols in the world. It's on t-shirts, football team logos, even military insignia. Modern submarines, for instance, have been known to raise a Jolly Roger after successful missions, borrowing the pirate tradition of signaling victory. Think about that, a flag designed to terrify merchants. In the 1700s still inspires awe in the 21st century. That's how effective the lie was. But let's return to the age of sail, to the moment of encounter. Imagine a merchant ship sailing from London to Jamaica. The crew is weary. The cargo holds heavy with sugar and rum. Suddenly, a ship approaches, flying the Union Jack, relief and ally. But then, the flag drops. In its place, black cloth unfurls. The Jolly Roger, panic, spreads like fire. The captain knows his cannons are outdated, his men inexperienced. Resistance is suicide. He lowers his colors and surrenders. No blood is spilled. The pirates board, strip the ship of valuables, and vanish into the horizon. The crew is left alive but humiliated, knowing they've been beaten not by guns, but by fabric. That scene played out again and again across oceans for decades. And yet, the deception could backfire. Some navies ordered their ships never to surrender to a pirate flag, no matter what. Better to die fighting than to trust the word of criminals. Stories spread of pirates who slaughtered crews after promising mercy. Every betrayal made the flag less effective. If fear turned into fury, the trick no longer worked. That was the delicate balance pirates walked. The Jolly Roger was only terrifying as long as enough people believed in its threat and its promise. Too much cruelty and resistance hardened. Too much mercy and the flag lost its bite. It was a psychological game that had to be constantly recalibrated. What's fascinating is how this game mirrors human nature far beyond piracy. We all respond to symbols, to signals that bypass logic and strike directly at emotion. Pirates simply weaponized this truth. Their flags were shortcuts to fear, just as propaganda posters in later centuries became shortcuts to patriotism or hatred. The human mind is vulnerable to images, and pirates exploited that vulnerability ruthlessly. So here's the paradox. The Jolly Roger was never about death. It was about choice. Surrender or resist. Live or die. Trust or gamble. It forced sailors into a corner, making them choose under pressure. And when people choose in fear, they almost always choose wrong. Pirates counted on that. They built their entire empire of theft and violence on it. But one question remains. If pirate flags were so effective, why did piracy eventually collapse? Why didn't the terror of the Jolly Roger keep the seas under pirate control forever? The answer lies not in the flags themselves, but in the growing power of the nations they defied. By the early 18th century, governments realized that piracy wasn't just a nuisance, it was an existential threat to global trade. And trade was the lifeblood of empires. Navies grew stronger, patrols became more frequent, and captured pirates were hanged by the dozens, often in public, their bodies displayed as warnings. Slowly but surely, the fear shifted. The pirate flag no longer promised terror, it promised a noose. And yet, even as the pirates themselves vanished, the legend of their flags only grew. Stories spread in taverns, in books, in plays. The Jolly Roger became bigger than the men who had flown it. And perhaps that's the greatest trick of all. A weapon of fear turned into a symbol of adventure, rebellion, and freedom. What once meant death now means defiance. The lie outlived the liars. By the early 1720s, the golden age of piracy was collapsing. The flags that once terrorized oceans were losing their edge. Not because they stopped being frightening, but because the world had adapted. Merchant ships began traveling in convoys under naval protection, and governments started rewarding pirate hunters with riches and fame. The Jolly Roger could terrify a lone merchantman, but it was useless against a well-armed warship bristling with cannons and soldiers. Still, the image of that skull and crossbones persisted, even when its practical power waned. And yet, stories from this era prove just how far pirates were willing to go to maintain the illusion. Some captains went as far as stitching fresh blood-red flags, knowing that even the rumor of a new, more terrifying banner could spread faster than any cannon shot. Others deliberately staged executions of captives in view of other ships. Not out of necessity, but as theaters so that the next time their flag appeared, the horror would be magnified. The flag itself was a canvas, but the legend surrounding it was what gave it sharp edges. Take the story of Calico Jack Rackham. His flag was one of the simplest, just a skull above crossed swords. But what made it infamous wasn't its design. It was the reputation of the crew behind it. Rackham sailed with two female pirates, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, whose presence shocked and fascinated sailors everywhere. Rumors swirled that these women fought harder and more ruthlessly than any man on board. When Rackham's flag rose, it wasn't just cloth. It was the face of a story people already half believed, a story that grew in taverns, ports, and courts across the Atlantic. His flag fooled enemies, not by what it showed, but by what it made them imagine. That was the true genius of pirate flags. They turned imagination into a weapon. The skull on black canvas was just a spark. The real fire burned in the minds of the victims who filled in the blanks with their own nightmares. Would they be spared, tortured, killed? Pirates rarely needed to answer. Fear did the work for them. But there's another side to this story, one less romantic and more revealing. Many pirate flags, especially the plain ones, were made quickly and crudely. A simple strip of cloth painted with tar or chalk could serve as a Jolly Roger. Pirates didn't always have the luxury of skilled artists or proper dyes. In some cases, what terrified sailors wasn't the detail of the design, but the very act of seeing a black flag rise suddenly where a national flag had been. The switch itself was the terror. It meant the mask had come off, and what stood before you was lawless, merciless, outside all order. This suggests that the power of pirate flags was never really in their artistry. It was in their timing, their performance. Pirates understood the stagecraft of fear. They understood that the moment of revelation, the friendly flag lowered. The black banner soaring was as dramatic as any play. That instant forced the enemy to confront a truth they couldn't prepare for. They were prey, and the predators had arrived. The irony is that pirates themselves often lived under constant fear. They feared betrayal by their own men, sudden storms, disease, and capture by authorities. Perhaps the skull and crossbones wasn't just a threat to others, but a mirror of their own reality. Pirates embraced death daily. Their flags only made the acceptance visible. In that sense, the Jolly Roger was not only a mask for enemies, but a confession of their own doomed existence. And yet, those same doomed men shaped a legacy that far outlasted them. When we think of piracy today, we don't picture the grinding hunger, the sickness, the brutal hangings in port cities. We picture the flag flying defiantly in the wind. That's how deeply the deception took root. The same piece of cloth that once fooled sailors into surrendering now fools us into imagining freedom and adventure. Pirates may have lost the battle at sea, but they won the war of memory. But let's dig deeper into why the flag worked at all. Why did seasoned sailors, tough men hardened by years at sea, collapse in terror at a bit of fabric? The answer lies in human psychology. Fear is contagious. One sailor sees the flag and panics. His panic spreads to the man next to him. Soon the entire crew is spiraling, hearts racing, hands shaking, eyes darting away from their cannons. A disciplined navy could hold the line, but merchant crews weren't soldiers. They were traders, farmers, men pressed into service. Their courage was fragile. Pirates understood that breaking morale was more effective than breaking hulls. The flag was a shortcut to that collapse. This principle is timeless. Armies throughout history have used banners, emblems, and symbols to intimidate enemies and inspire followers. The Roman legions carried eagles. Nazi Germany wielded the swastika. Modern nations fly their flags into battle. The difference is that pirates twisted the practice for fear alone. They didn't want loyalty or patriotism. They wanted surrender. And here's the haunting truth: it worked too well. For a brief, shining decade, the Jolly Roger gave ragtag crews of outlaws power that rivaled empires. But its very success made it a target. The British Crown, the French, the Spanish, they all realized that so long as that banner struck fear into hearts, piracy would thrive. So they flipped the script. They began flying their own black flags when hunting pirates, a cruel irony that turned the weapon back on its creators. Worse still, captured pirates were executed under those same banners, transforming the symbol into a sentence of death. The lie unraveled, because once the world understood it, the trick lost its magic. And yet, the legend endured. By the 19th century, pirates were mostly gone, but novels like Treasure Island revived their imagery. The skull and crossbones entered popular culture not as a symbol of terror, but as a romantic badge of freedom. Hollywood carried it further until children waved Jolly Rogers on Halloween, never realizing they once stood for slaughter. The deception didn't end at sea, it leaped into history, and from history into myth. Think about it. A flag that once fooled hardened sailors into surrender now fools us into cheering, dressing up, and dreaming of pirate adventures. It's the longest con in history, a trick that outlived its tricksters. That may be the most brilliant deception of all. So the next time you see the Jolly Roger on a t-shirt, a football helmet, or a movie screen, remember the truth. It wasn't a symbol of reckless courage. It was a carefully crafted illusion, a tool of fear, a weapon of surrender. It fooled captains, it fooled crews, and in some ways, it still fools us today. Pirates may be gone, but their flags still fly not on masts. But in our minds, that's the power of a lie told well. That's how pirate flags fooled the enemy. And if you want more hidden stories and truths like this one, don't forget to subscribe.